Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. And in this video, I'll be sharing my 5 favorite moments from Alexander McQueen. And whether you're a longtime McQueen fan or not, hopefully this video will give you a deeper appreciation of his life and work. A brief history about McQueen. He is from the East End and has Scottish roots. He has a love for the macabre. His design philosophy is the idea of destroying in order to create. He mastered tailoring working on Savile Row, and Seville Row is just a small street where some of the highest level of bespoke tailoring happens. He described his work as classic tailoring with a hint of perversity. All his collections are autobiographical. He really pulls from past experiences, what's going on now, and really shows them and brings them to the forefront in his work. He grew up in a working class area of London and a working class family, and this is really powerful and meaningful as his story goes on because this is how the British media always kind of framed him. They called him the Rottweiler of fashion. He also apprenticed in the costume department of London theaters, and he briefly was the creative director at Givenchy. So let's start with The Hunger. This is my favorite show by far, and this is McQueen's Spring Summer 1996 show. This collection was all about desire, power, and transformation. The models moved as if they were possessed, showcasing looks inspired by vampiric themes and seduction. It was theatrical, haunting, and introduced the raw intensity that would become McQueen's trademark. This was his first runway featuring menswear, and this was due to a contract obligation. For his clothes to be produced, they required him to also come out with a menswear line. And this included trousers in leather and other men's suiting fabrics. There was a lot of 1950s style, kind of short sleeve button up shirts, tailored leather jackets, and of course his signature bumpsters. A lot of sharp 1980s tailoring, fitted long sleeve jersey dresses in black and in beige. This was the first time that McQueen and Tracy worked together. Tracy is the one who did his faceless mask in this show. McQueen instructed the models in this show to be rude to the audience, give them the finger, scowl, and swear. My favorite thing about this show is the worm corset. McQueen made a two-layered thick plastic corset with worms sandwiched in between them. The model wore it with a high-waisted red skirt, a chain through the crotch, and a fitted kimono jacket lined in matching red silk. He wanted the viewer to feel uncomfortable, to question conventional beauty, to respect nature, and to be confronted by the eventuality of death. Also, this guy has just like a really cool walk, and I wish I could walk in any room like this. So here's more pictures from the show. You see the tailoring in solid black, white, navy, gunmetal gray, and brick. The women also wore sharply cut jackets without shirts so they could flash their breast, and bumpsters slashed vertically to reveal their buttocks. The men wore more casual variations of the jackets with bumpsters as well. The second half of the show was more fluid and soft, with the gas jersey dresses, floral and feather print shifts, and long pencil skirts. The Hunger was McQueen's most commercial and accomplished collection at the time. McQueen understood that the new femininity is more about giving the finger than it's about mincing along in court shoes like a 1950s deb. I really love the song when Jimmy Per Se comes out. His walk, his attitude, the soundtrack, it's all just like, it's perfect to me. Next, we have the Highland Rape, Autumn Winter 1995. This was one of McQueen's most controversial and groundbreaking collections. The show confronted issues of oppression, violence, and identity, with torn fabrics and raw edges symbolizing the struggle of his Scottish heritage. The models walked with a sense of defiance and vulnerability, forcing the audience to reckon with uncomfortable truths. So this show was inspired by England's violent clearing of the Scottish Highlands. It was England's rape of Scotland. These models were in torn garments as if they were escaping their oppressors. McQueen was also fed up with Vivienne Westwood and Galliano's cliche, costumey, flamboyantly Scottish clothes, having nothing to do with either Scotland or modern dress. McQueen wanted to make clothes that truly reflected the history of Scotland so that women could wear them in a contemporary everyday life setting. And I also think about this walk all the time. It's so strong, it's so powerful, she's super beautiful, everything about it is perfect. The top is perfect, face is perfect. It's the best walk of all time. I think about this walk every day. The cornerstone fabric of this was the McQueen tartan. It was a rich red and pine green check with a thin yellow line crossing through it. You have bustles and crinoline skirts, modern suits with sculpted plunging necklines, and opaque contact lenses. McQueen really loved the opaque contact lens. He used it in a couple of his shows because it took away the model's personality and made them more drone-like. McQueen used a lot of lace in the show, which he sprayed with metallic car paint to create different colors and texture effects. McQueen also worked with more colors than usual: royal blue, periwinkle, bronze, ivy, green, and lavender. McQueen used the tartan to construct complicated dresses based on traditional Scottish attire. Still, with very little money at the time, McQueen used really cheap fabrics and made them look expensive. During this time, McQueen was deemed as difficult because he refused to have his face photographed, but later explained that he was still signing for welfare checks and didn't want to be recognized by government officials. This show described by McQueen as macabre, romantic, theatrical, streetwise, and honest. For this collection, the show notes read, "The Scottish Highlands have been a great inspiration to many designers in the past, but they have been romanticized all too often. There were swaths of tartan, but only as protection against the elements. Protection proved not to be enough against the fury of soldiers, as in many places and at many times across the world." A lot of people misread this show and thought that he was making fun of victims of SA, but it was about England's SA of Scotland. It was another interpretation of McQueen's life on the runway. McQueen's work was his story, who he was as a person. This show was about him. Before Highland Rape, there was Banshee, an earlier collection where McQueen's genius was already clear. This show was inspired by Irish folklore, with a focus of the haunting figure of the Banshee. The garments were otherworldly, with distressed fabrics and eerie silhouettes that reflected McQueen's fascination with storytelling through design. It set the stage for the darker, more theatrical direction his work would take. My favorite thing about this show is the branding of spray paint on the models' heads, one particular model's walk, and how she does the scream pose at the very end of the catwalk. I love the soundtrack, and of course, I love the bumpsters. The lyrics for the soundtrack: "Am I a bitch? Yes. Am I a whore? No. You wanna fuck? Let's go." There was molded plaster breastplates inspired by Greek sculptures that broke and cracked as the model walked, which also created this like wind chime kind of sound effect. You have a pullover turtleneck with transparent panels that revealed the bosom, and this was made by Julian McDonald, and they called it the "Get Your Tits Out." Julian McDonald worked with Alexander McQueen a lot during this era. Julian McDonald specialized in knitwear, and he later went on to become the head designer of knitwear at Chanel under Karl Lagerfeld. The show featured empired waistlines, and that is the waistline right below the breast. You also have frock coats cut in the 16th century method based on architecture. This show started with a pregnant model with a shaved head, dressed in a black Elizabethan-like gown, and the name McQueen stenciled on the side of her head. This was based on a look from a painting in 1434 that I don't want to butcher the name, but this is the look, this is the painting. You also have this really cool black frock coat with resin poured on it, and it was hardened to look like black glass. The hem and sleeves had shards of resin hanging off of them, and they broke and shattered as the model walked. It's also really nice to see Isabella Blow walk this show, her top decorated with broken Stella beer bottles. And to give a little brief history about Isabella Blow, this was McQueen's muse, his mentor, his cheerleader, and walking billboard. She introduced him to a lot of industry people early in his career and really took the helm and helped steer him into the right direction. She also suggested that he use his middle name, Alexander, instead of Lee because it sounded far more aristocratic and powerful. She worked at British Vogue and Sunday Times. She also did a lot of styling for people and consulting. She first noticed Alexander McQueen at his CSM degree fashion show. That show was titled Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victims. And she was heartbroken when McQueen didn't take her to Givenchy with him. She always wore really cool hats. That was kind of her statement piece, was these really cool hats by Philip Treacy. And she also discovered Treacy as well and connected Treacy to Alexander McQueen and had them work together. She also ended up passing away from suicide the same way her father did. For his spring-summer 1995 collection, The Birds, McQueen drew inspiration from Alfred Hitchcock's classic film. The show was suspenseful and unsettling, with sharp tailoring and dramatic silhouettes, evoking the feeling of being haunted. It was one of the first time McQueen showed his talent for merging cinematic storytelling with innovational design, and it left a lasting impression on the fashion world. So this was his fourth official collection and his third show. His first one didn't really count as it was his CSM degree show, Jack the Ripper Stalks His Victims. And the central theme was inspired by The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock, particularly the pencil skirts worn in the film. McQueen said that this was complete chaos and human vulnerability in the face of nature gone wrong, interpreted by the tire track design printed on garments, which also led to the white lines on the catwalk like a rose. He gained financial backing after this show, distribution for 15 years, and a manufacturing agreement. What he wanted to depict was this beautiful, sexy woman that's placed into different environments and put at extreme risk, but she ends up winning at the end. McQueen also did some bird watching as a kid, and the theme of birds come up a lot in his work. This plastic dress look was inspired by his friend who hooked up with a guy that wrapped him up in plastic. Also, really cool about this show is the McQueen hair label. And these are small plastic squares that contain human hair that was a nod to the Victorian period. Prostitutes would sell their kits of hair locks, which were bought by people to give to their lovers. It also had to do with the idea of keeping a memento of someone, such as Victorian women wore a clip of their baby's hair in a locket, or American Indian warriors scalped their conquest. For his first labels, McQueen used his own hair. We also have the bumpsters coming from this show. At 23, McQueen invented a new silhouette. It was a low waistline, which revealed the pubes and derriere. He said that he wanted to elongate the body, not just show the bum. McQueen said to him, that part of the body, not so much the butt, but the bottom of the spine, that's the most erotic part of anyone's body, man or woman. Here we have more knitwear by Julian McDonald, and we also have this black feathered neck shoulder piece on a gold shift. Katie England was the stylist for the show, and she told her assistant to go outside and grab a wheel off of a car. England covered the tire with smudge and rolled it on the girl's naked body so flashes of tire marks would show from under a jacket or on an arm. So Women's Wear Daily said the show was filled with raw sex and should help resurrect London's reputation for street fashion. The New York Times said it was easily the most talked about designer. Tailored jackets were nothing short of perfect. Finally, we have the Voss show from Spring Summer 2001, and this was a masterpiece of psychological drama. The show took place in a glass box with models appearing like specimens in a bizarre, unsettling asylum. McQueen used this setting to explore themes of mental illness, beauty standards, and societal judgment. The final moment when a nude figure covered in moth emerged from the glass left the audience in stunned silence. It was peak McQueen, disturbing, provocative, and unforgettable. This show was named after a Norwegian town known for birdwatching. He called it his best yet. It's about nature and the elements. The audience could see him, but the models could only see their reflection. It reminds me of the Balenciaga 360 snow show. In the mirror sat the big rusted stained wall box. McQueen told his models that you're in a lunatic asylum. I need you to go mental, have a nervous breakdown, die, and then come back to life. Models had their heads wrapped in white gauze bandages as if they had just undergone brain surgery. The major influence was by Joel Peter Wicken's 1983 Sanitarium, which featured a voluptuous naked woman wearing a head mask with mercury-like wings on her ears. Reclining in a classical pose and breathing through a glass tube attached to the mouth of a monkey strung up on a backdrop. Joel Peter Wickens also inspired the mask from McQueen's autumn-winter 1996 show titled Dante. For this show, he collected hundreds of the finger-shaped shells and designed a long sleeveless column and covered it entirely with them like fringe. He also used sea pearls and feathers. From a flea market in France, he bought a 19th century Japanese screen made of embroidered silk. He fused it to stronger cotton, which he then hand sewed into a Korean-shaped kimono over a full skirt covered with flat black oyster shells. The kimono was topped off with a neckpiece of silver branches decorated with gray Tahitian pearls. American Express also sponsored this show. There was also a long jade green ostrich plume skirt, an almond green chiffon top with taxidermy hawks attached to her head and shoulders that bobbed as she walked. I love how the hawks have like bits of her top intertwined in their talons as if they're attempting to fly her away. McQueen said, it's to do with the politics of the world, the way life is, and what is beauty. Kathy Horn called McQueen a great designer who was not only making beautiful clothes, but also responding like an artist to the horror and insanity in contemporary culture. A lot of these pieces had actual shells on them that the models ripped off and smashed to the floor. The shells had outlived their usefulness on the beach, so we put them to another use on a dress. The models came out and trashed the dress, so their usefulness was over once again, kind of like fashion. A couple of my favorite looks from this show is this gray Japanese kimono with floral and bird embroidery and a matching rectangle box hat. You have this really cool engraved. It reminds me of that wooden corset that Taylor Russell wore from Loewe at the Met. You also have this sleeveless gown with a bodice made of red stained microscope glass and a skirt of red and black ostrich plume. I think what draws me to his work the most is his unapologetic authenticity and his ability to turn the harsh realities of life into something beautiful. As someone who also comes from humble beginnings, I relate to his drive and faith in himself to become so extraordinary. I love his dark, raw approach. His collections weren't about making things just pretty, they were emotional, real, and honest. And the way he made women look so chic, sexy, and powerful just gets me excited every time I revisit his work. Queen reminds me that even the darkest parts of life can inspire something truly beautiful, and I hope his story inspires you as much as it inspires me.